All right, as I said, welcome to the second webinar in our 2016 Tree Board webinar series. Today's topic is community tree planting programs, thinking outside of the box. We've got two presenters today, Dave Cable with Tree Charlotte, as well as Cindy Rice with Trees Across Raleigh. The first presenter is going to be Dave Cable. Dave has had a varied career that has transitioned him from banking to his real passion of preserving the environment we all enjoy in this wonderful city of Charlotte. He currently serves as the Executive Director for Trees Charlotte, which is a public-private collaboration to grow and diversify Charlotte's urban forests by planting 500,000 trees by the year 2050, promoting tree stewardship and educating how to plant and preserve trees. Prior to launching Trees Charlotte, Dave served as Executive Director of Catawba Land Conservancy and the Carolina Thread Trail to lay the groundwork for a 15-county trail network of conservation corridors for the public to enjoy nature. Dave previously worked for Wachovia Securities before joining the Conservancy, where he was Director of Real Estate Research in Corporate and Investment Banking. Dave holds a Master's of Science degree from the University of Vermont and a bachelor's degree from Bowdoin. I did not say that correctly, Bowdoin College. And with that, Dave, you can get started on your presentation. Hopefully it's come up there. And I will hand things over to you.
Great, Leslie. Well, thank you. And thank everybody for joining this call today. Hopefully it will be a worthwhile experience for you. I'm looking forward to reviewing with you a little bit about our program. It's a young program. We're in our fourth planting season, and in the Carolinas, we plant trees between October and April. So we are right at the tail end of our fourth season. And there are kind of five major takeaways that I wanted to start out with, and hopefully you'll pick up on these and they'll be reinforced through the conversation today. But I think the first is the importance of the collaborative model that Trees Charlotte has promoted. I mean, everything we have done has really been in a collaborative framework and has focused on community partnerships. Those relationships across the community have really paid us a lot of dividends. So from the very beginning of even creating the program, we had a very collaborative process that was process-rich, and it was a little slow in the beginning, but as I look back on it, that's been a very important part of making the program successful. The second thing is having a community canopy goal so that you really have a galvanized community around that goal. But what I found is that it also, when you have a nonprofit, as we are, that is advancing public policy, it can really help with foundation funding. So having a goal that you can align yourself with and relate your mission to a community goal is an important piece of this too. The third point is the importance of stewardship. There's a lot of froth and fun and energy in planting trees, but as many of you know on the phone, it's really just the beginning and really only 10% of the total equation. So I'm reminded every day, particularly as our inventory of trees grows, about the importance of stewardship. The fourth point is to would encourage all of you that are at the beginning stages of this to really aim high on your board strength. I've found that we've got a good, strong board, and they're invested in the project, and they're very well connected in the community. And you just can't aim high enough on your board. I mean, that's how I would say that. And lastly, we have really avoided the regulatory framework around the tree ordinance here in Charlotte. Because I think we always want to be associated with a positive message about the canopy. So that's the fifth point that I wanted to make, and we can talk more about that as needed going forward. Leslie mentioned some uploads that can be found in the upper right-hand corner of your panel there, and I did want to just quickly review those because otherwise I'm sure I'm going to forget. What you have out there is a 4-panel brochure that I call our Rotary brochure. It's kind of the basic thing that we use when we go around and do a lot of talks to civic groups or, meet with garden clubs and all that kind of stuff. It's in a PDF form out there, so you won't see how it actually is folded, but you'll get the idea of what the content is. The leaflet is out there too, which is our newsletter. I think that's our maybe third newsletter that we've done. The third item is a species list. We're planting about 50 different varieties this year. And I think the list is for 14, 15, but it really didn't change all that much from last year. So you'll see the diversity of species that we're working on this year. The fourth item, and I don't know whether you'll find this helpful or not, but it's our event checklist. So if we're doing a neighborhoods event or we're doing a school or campus event, you'll see this just kind of a tedious checklist, and I thought if someone was starting out on a program, you might find that to be helpful. I'm not sure about that. And then lastly, we worked on developing a K-5 lesson plan for the schools, and that curriculum is out there for anybody who might be interested in that. And all I would ask on any of these items, if you end up using anything, just give some credit to Tree Charlotte for it, but hopefully they will help you advance your programs. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with the presentation here, and the slide number 2 just shows some pictures of Charlotte back around the turn of the century, and I find in talking to groups it's important to set the stage that while Charlotte really has a fantastic tree canopy now, it didn't just happen by chance. It was because of very deliberate actions on the part of our forefathers and foremothers, and some of the areas of Charlotte that have the richest canopy going back to the turn of the century, they were literally cotton fields with no trees at all. But due to some really good design work and efforts on the part of a lot of people back around the turn of the century, we've got a tremendous canopy, which I think sets the stage for real planting heritage in Charlotte that we are attempting to build on as we go forward. In 2010, we did our first aerial analysis that was really well done. Before that, we had a variety of different looks at the canopy, but they weren't all that well done. And of course, as all of you know, the technology has changed measurably. The 2010 analysis was completed in 2011, and then it was done again, I guess, last year, maybe the year before. And within the city of Charlotte, we're sitting right at about 46 or 47%. You can see on this slide how we stack up against some other cities. And you can also see the map to the right there that while the canopy is rich overall, there are some pockets with very, very limited coverage. So the canopy analysis that was done in 2010 and 11 really revealed several things about the canopy that served to inspire the City Council to pass a 50% canopy goal by the year 2050. And the three things that came out of that were most important: number one, there was clear evidence that we could benchmark ourselves against a lot of cities and, in fact, tell the story that Charlotte really does have an extraordinary canopy in a lot of ways. Number two, while there are many areas in the city that, enjoy a very rich urban forest, there are many parts of the city that essentially have no trees at all. And then the third component that came out of the study was that we were losing trees at a pretty significant rate. The estimate was in the 5-year period before the analysis, we lost about 3% of the canopy, which was somewhere around 10,000 acres of trees. And so that really helped to rally, rally the community and the City Council to pass that 50% goal. As I mentioned to you, one of the findings of that study was that while the canopy was rich, it was not evenly distributed. And I show you this picture because it's typical of many of the communities in Charlotte, particularly those that were developed in the 80s and 90s, where there was a lot of tree removal. This project neighborhood is Slater Springs, which we are working with to hold a planting event next year. And we have a lot of neighborhoods in Charlotte that kind of look like this. So the sweet spot for us in terms of our neighborhood and neighborhoods programs are obviously the neighborhood has to have a low canopy cover, typically underserved with a relatively low price point, but a relatively high amount of homeowners, so not a lot of rentals, because it's hard to work with the rental community and have them actually engage and have ownership for the process. So we have good potential in Charlotte because we have a lot of neighborhoods that include those series of factors. In Charlotte, we've got a fantastic legacy of a great street tree program. We have about 185,000 street trees here. Roughly 150,000 of them have been inventoried. And while we don't know the composition of the overall forest, we can use the street tree inventory as a pretty good proxy for the overall canopy. Roughly about 1,000 street trees are planted every year in the city. That number can swell up to as many as north of 5 and even close to 10,000, depending on where we are in the capital cycle. We're kind of going into a heavy capital cycle now, and I anticipate that while we haven't planted a lot of street trees in the last several years, we're going to be picking that up in the coming years. About 700 trees are going to be removed this year. That number's been escalating because one of the issues with our canopy is that it's geriatric. We have a lot of trees, and I showed you those pictures early on around the turn of the century. There were a lot of trees that were planted about 100 years ago. The tree of choice at that point was the willow oak, which has been a fabulous urban tree for us. It's performed very well, but they're stressed, and we're losing more and more of them as time goes on. So while our street tree program has been great, I think the aerial analysis in Charlotte has raised the awareness of the importance of not just managing the street tree program as part of the urban forest, but really taking a holistic look at the forest itself. The street trees make up about 6 or 7% of the total canopy, and so I think that the City Council, in passing that 50% goal, was pretty quick to realize that if we're going to manage the forest, we really need to look beyond just having a very robust street tree program. And with that effort came the realization that, a well-managed forest really has 3 primary components to it. A good regulatory component, with land use controls and an ordinance, a good street tree program and capital project function, and then lastly, this community tree planting and education. And that last pillar was not in place prior to Tree Charlotte. So when Charlotte passed that 50 by 50 goal, there was a pretty quick realization that the city needed a nonprofit partner to work on the voluntary tree planting potential that existed in the community to meet that 50% goal. Tree Charlotte was formed about 4 or 5 years ago, and it really came out of a merging together of 2 efforts. One was the canopy goal that was passed by City Council in 2011, and then there was a Knight Foundation funded committee that was looking at the canopy simultaneously with the city's analysis, and those 2 efforts essentially came together to form the idea of Tree Charlotte. The city realized it needed to move beyond street trees, and every 1% of our canopy is about 100,000 trees. So if we're at 46, 47% now, we know we're losing trees to development and to the aging canopy, and that's where the $500,000 number came to meet, or 500,000 tree figure came to meet the 50% goal. Shortly after the city and the Knight Foundation committee came together to say we need a partner with the city. I spent some time talking to a lot of people in Charlotte and also looking at programs across the country. We then had a stakeholders meeting. This was, I think there were about 50 or 55 people there that came together to hear the ideas around what Tree Charlotte could be, and get feedback from all the different stakeholders on the important components of the program. And this was a very important process to go through. It soliciting all the feedback from the stakeholders certainly took a lot of time, but it has paid dividends because there's a real sense of broad community ownership across the Tree Charlotte platform. And because we are operating it as a collaborative, the partnerships are very, very important to the success of the organization. Some of the other important successes, and I've covered a number of these already, the canopy study and having the clear goal has been helpful. Our relationship with the city is very good and very strong. The city essentially provides us with all the technical support for what Tree Charlotte does. And without that partnership, we would be dead in the water. There's no question about it. We have a strong board, and that has been very important to advancing the project. both in terms of fundraising and reaching into the community with the message of Tree Charlotte. We have tried to stay very close to the science of urban forestry, and as I reflect on the last 3 or 4 years, I think that's an important thing that we've done, and I would encourage all of you to do that too in your programs. And again, the relationship with the city has really helped us to do that. We have 4 growers that we work with. We don't look at those folks as being vendors. We look at them as being partners, and they have a vested interest in our success. We are heavily dependent on them, and we were very careful about selecting them, and we've been pleased with the way those partnerships have worked. And then the broad group of community partnerships that that I already made reference to. So these are kind of some of the core ingredients to success so far as I contemplate about what where we've been and what we've been able to accomplish. The collaborative is really kind of a three-legged stool, and I've touched on some of this. The city provides the technical expertise for Tree Charlotte. They really help us with going into the school and figuring out where we're going to put the trees and what trees should go there, help us to order the trees and make sure the specs are tight, and that relationship is strong. Tree Charlotte's job is to raise the dollars. All the trees that we put in the ground are purchased with private funding. We do not receive any direct funding from the city, only in-kind support. So we're raising private dollars to make the function, or to make the whole Tree Charlotte machine work and buy the trees. And then we also provide some community leadership, spread the word about Tree Charlotte, promote the education arm, and then provide leadership in the community to make the event successful. And then a long list of community partners help us to really provide the horsepower to make the whole thing work and get the trees in the ground and make sure that they're cared for. So that's pretty much how the model works. It's pretty simple, but it's pretty effective. This is a laundry list of some of our community partners, and I won't belabor this, but it's just to make the point that Tree Charlotte, which has a very, very lean staff and a low budget, could not do anywhere close to what it does without these relationships. And I won't grind through the details of those, but they're all very important to us, and there are many others too. This chart on page 19 or page 13 really sets forth the relationships that we have to run neighborhoods. I see Tree Charlotte in the first panel to the left. The Catawba Lands Conservancy, which is a local land trust, they really help us to organize the events and coordinate the volunteers. The City of Charlotte provides us with technical support, and we've already reviewed that. There is a tree commission, the Charlotte Tree Advisory Commission, and we have partnered with them to advance Arbor Day and Arbor Week here in Charlotte. We actually have this year Arbor Day is in North Carolina is on March 18th, and we're taking that whole week and doing a whole bunch of events. And the Charlotte Tree Advisory Commission has been an important partner in that effort. The community partners provide the volunteers, and then the neighborhood organizations, the HOA groups, and the self-help groups are those that really help us to organize the individual community events that we do. This is a listing of our board of directors. The names won't mean much to the folks on the phone, but I just put this slide in here to remind me to make the point that if you're starting out with an organization, I would really encourage you to aim as high as you possibly can with your board. We were fortunate to have a couple of key people that really believed in this program early on, that were influential. Johnny Harris being one of them, who is a local real estate developer, and pulled in a lot of folks into this board that are very influential in the community. So this has been an important part of making Tree Charlotte what it is today. For our planting projects, this is a summary of our projects today, and again, the names won't mean much, but it gives you a flavor of the volume of projects and what the venues are. Most of our trees go into either neighborhoods or schools. We do some park plantings, but not as much. So neighborhoods and schools are our primary venues, and then we do 2 citywide tree stores, which are tree giveaway events, one in the fall and one in the spring. So this is the composition of our program for this fiscal year for planting events. The neighborhoods events are pretty straightforward. We typically work with the neighborhoods a year in advance to plan the event. We help them by providing them with a lot of information to promote the event within their community. And the way the events typically run, they're on a Saturday morning. Folks come out about 9 o'clock. They have pre-registered. We get them registered at the site. We will have anywhere from 5 to 15 different varieties of trees there. They'll learn about the trees, select the trees they want. They'll go through an orientation process on how to plant. They'll sign a stewardship pledge form that assures that they're going to take care of the trees. And then they'll go to the tree store, pick out their trees and a bag of mulch per tree. And the formula works pretty well. We've had a lot of success, but the toolkit that we provide to the neighborhood leaders has been an important piece of helping them to be armed to promote the event within their communities. And if any of you are interested in this, all of the stuff is downloadable off the website. It's treecharlotte.org. There are a lot of brochures. There's some stuff that's been translated. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff out there that you may find interesting depending on, at what state your program is in its evolution. But we found this to be an important part of making the program successful. These are just some shots of these events. What you see before you are these containerized trees, which is really our bread and butter. It's a 7 to 15 gallon containerized tree. They're grown, in treated pots, and we've had very good luck with these 4 growers. They're large enough to be durable. We do emphasize native trees in all places that we can, although we do not plant exclusively natives. Most of the species are fairly drought resistant, and we're pleased at the quality that the growers have been able to provide to us. The 2 citywide tree stores I mentioned to you, we typically give away between 400 and 700 trees on those Saturdays. They're typically well attended, as you can see on this slide. And the process is pretty much the same as it would be in an individual neighborhood, but it's done on a larger scale. And these create typically some buzz in the community, and they're just great awareness, getting devices for Tree Charlotte, great outreach tools, and everyone, in addition to leaving with trees, hopefully leaves with a greater appreciation for the canopy and the urban forest and how they can do a better job of caring for their trees, because we do run them through a process around those items at the tree stores. Our school events are quite popular. We have a good partnership with CMS. We have a countywide school system here, which I think has about 150 schools. We've planted about 25 of them so far. These are great corporate event opportunities. We do some midweek events on teacher work days and then some weekend events too on Saturdays. In the schools, we are promoting education programs. We've got a program called Tree Champions, where we try to work with the principal to identify a tree champion in a school. We pay them a $500 stipend, and they help to do 2 things. One, connect us with the school so that we have good participation in the planting event at the school, and then they work to drive that K-5 curriculum into the programs at the school. So that program this is our first year, so we're still kind of learning it. It's piloted to a large degree, but it's coming along, but it's going to have some changes. For each of the schools that we plant, we're pretty careful about the planting plan, and this is a plan that we did for a high school a couple of years ago. These plans are done by the City of Charlotte for us. They're essentially landscaping plans that identify where the trees are going to go, and this is an important tool for us because there are all sorts of programming conflicts and exterior security cameras that need to be worked around, and there's quite a process that we go through with CMS to get these plans approved, both at the administrative level for the entire district and then also at the individual school level. You can see the zones. This is how we pick our projects up. We break them up into zones, and then all the volunteers are assigned to different zones. And we rely very heavily on a group of leadership folks who we call tree masters. They go through an orientation process with us. These people are critical to the success of Tree Charlotte. They go through a process to learn, what Tree Charlotte's all about and what the key talking points are and how to keep the volunteers safe and happy and get the trees in the ground correctly. So this has been an important piece of kind of disaggregating the risk and responsibility of a large-scale event. We do have stewardship programs that are ramping up as we're now in our 4th year. We're about to begin our 5th year next year. More and more trees out there to be cared for, both in the neighborhoods and the school settings. And this is an area of growth for us. I'm calling that a frontier. I mentioned to you 7 15-gallon trees, typically what we plant. These are our 4 growers. As you can see here, we're buying between 5,000 and 6,000 of those trees every year from these 4 growers. And they do a really great job for us. This is a summary of where we've planted so far, and you can see the schools and the neighborhoods are really the bread and butter of the program. We've given away about 12,000 seedlings. We do those at ball games and Earth Day events and kind of all different places across Charlotte to spread the word and hope that many of them will get in the ground and actually grow. But we don't keep track of those like we do our 7-gallon trees. These are our locations where we've planted. We're trying to cover as much of the city as possible, but also be strategic about being focused in those areas where the canopy is most needed. Touched on the education piece of this. We do have a tree champion program in the schools that I mentioned and the curriculum. At most of our neighborhood events, we also do a education program for kids while the parents are registering. These are done in cooperation with the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. They have a program called Outdoor University, and we've kind of bootstrapped our tree training program to that, our tree education program. So that's a good example of a collaboration where we aren't actually doing it, but they're an important key partner with us to get that piece of it done. Our frontiers going forward, stewardship piece is important. We're advancing our Tree Master program. We have Tree Master 2.0, which is going to be launched next month, which is all about pruning and tree establishment and disease detection and things like that. We're developing some partnerships with the real estate development community to try to encourage better development across Charlotte, and we're considering an expansion of the footprint outside the city of Charlotte to the areas that are in the county around us. The Tree Charlotte Board has also decided to raise an endowment, and so we're beginning that process. This is our budget for this year. It gives you a rough idea of what we're spending. It's about a $500,000 budget. This is privately raised every year. There is no direct funding from the city, but the city provides us with some really critical in-kind support, which has a value of around $220,000 at this point. Funding strategies, the board I mentioned earlier has been a key piece of this. Our campaign so far has been really high touch, a lot of lunches, a lot of individual calls on people. The corporate support has been strong for our events, and that will continue because it's a way for companies to have an experience for their employees and mixed in the community, which has been really successful. We are trying to diversify our donor base and make it much more granular as time goes on, and then we've got this endowment goal that we're just beginning to work on now. This is a list of some of our key supporters. We've had good luck with both foundations and corporations, and hopefully we'll be able to keep a lot of these folks on for many years to come. So I think, Leslie, I'm going to end there. I think I'm right at about 25 minutes, maybe a whisker beyond that. I apologize, and I'm going to pass it over to Cindy.
All right, Dave, thank you so much. As I said earlier, because this is a recorded webinar and we have everybody on listen-only mode, if you do have questions for Dave, we'll answer them all at the end after Cindy presents. But you can go ahead and type your question into the Q&A box while you're talking about it, and I will make sure that they all get addressed at the end of the presentation. So thank you, Dave, for that. We're going to move on to the second presenter in this series is Cindy Rice. Cindy has had her own planning and landscape architecture firm here in Raleigh, North Carolina for the last 23 years. She is one of the founding members of Trees Across Raleigh. She's been with that organization from its origination. She served as the president for Trees Across Raleigh for 8 years, and during that time, and she continues to be heavily involved with Trees Across Raleigh, she served as project manager, grant writer, volunteer coordinator. She's pretty much done everything behind the scenes that you could possibly do for a nonprofit organization. And Cindy is going to talk a little bit about Trees Across Raleigh and what they have accomplished in their existence since 1996. So with that, Cindy, here, you can take over.
Thank you, Leslie. I really appreciate it. And wow, Dave, I'm blown away. Great job. Trees Across Raleigh is a different scale of nonprofit than Trees Charlotte. We're small. We're all volunteer. And we've learned a few lessons along our 20-year path of existence. And that's what I'd like to share with you today is how we started out and some of the nuts and bolts of setting up a nonprofit, as well as what happens over time. You're not the same entity at 5 years that you become something different at 20 years as we are now. So with that in mind, Trees Across Raleigh is, as I just said, a small nonprofit, all-volunteer organization. And we started in 1996 out of the dire need here in the city of Oaks for tree planting. There was no real strong public funding. Neighborhoods did not exist in Raleigh at that time. Tree conservation regulations did not exist in Raleigh at that time. Getting trees planted on a property really fell to the developer or not at all. So seeing that as our niche, we decided to start planting in parks, in public property, public rights of way, and fill that need for more trees. As you know, trees add value, they increase property, they provide environmental benefits, all of those good things for all of us. But we would not have been successful, as Dave said, in Charlotte without our partners. And from the get-go, City of Raleigh staff has been a partner with Trees Across Raleigh. As I said, the need was pretty strong, and we wanted to also involve the community and create a way for them to feel like they're really part of the city of Raleigh. And tree planting, it's fun. We have had a really good time over the years. Taking care of the trees afterwards is something that we have had a strong commitment to, and that aspect of what we do is not as sexy as planting a tree, for sure, but it's critical to the survival of the trees that we plant. In our first, let's start with some of our steps. So we do planting events twice a year in late fall and early spring. Our first project was on Glenwood Avenue, and we planted 55 trees, and we had about 45 volunteers come out. We planned that project to be implemented in the late fall of '96, but September 6, 1996, a little lady blew into town named Fran. We were coping with losing 28% of our tree canopy from that hurricane. We postponed, obviously, until March to plant Glenwood Avenue. In our history, we've planted 10,000 trees roughly with 5,000 volunteers, about two-thirds of whom are under the age of 18. And we valued our contribution to the city of Raleigh as well over $1 million. This was Glenwood Avenue in March 1997. I don't know, can you even see the trees there? Probably not. And 10 years later, same place, the tree canopy has really grown up. That's the great thing about trees. They will grow as long as you have good maintenance. So what our goal has been to really increase community awareness to benefit trees through educational and participation projects in tree plantings to counteract the ongoing loss of trees throughout not only Raleigh but the greater Triangle area. We've been fortunate to have growth continue through the last downturn in our economy, but also to encourage volunteers, especially with our younger citizens, a commitment and awareness in our community is a strong component of what we're trying to achieve. So The three phases that I think Trees Across Raleigh has gone through really are startup, how we got started, our growth and expansion and awareness of how to run projects, and now 12, 15, 20 years later, how we've adapted to the changing environment. As I said initially, neighborhoods didn't exist. Now neighborhoods does exist in Raleigh. They are a city-run program for street tree planting. Our tree conservation ordinance has been in place for about 8 years now. It's another element that helps preserve trees. But so let's go to startup. And as Dave said, organizational. It didn't go. Okay, there we go. For us, our mission statement, a clear, concise mission statement, was critical in how we got the ball rolling. Board recruitment, yes, critical, as David said. We are, however, a smaller board and all volunteer board. How do you pay for all of this? How do you pay for trees? Funding, key. And then political awareness, not being involved in politics, but being aware of what's going on in the political arena so that we're responsive. So, mission statement. Ours is across the top there. It's pretty straightforward and short, and that's one of the things that we learned was that treat it as your elevator pitch. If somebody asks you what you do for a living and you've got the length of an elevator ride, what would you say? How would you say it? Concise, short, certainly less than half a page of written text. So you have to boil it down to the very essence. Not easy, but very doable. Board selection. We did a survey of several nonprofits, about 10 different nonprofits here in Raleigh over the last year, and found out that many of the smaller nonprofits like us are operating with 6 to 10 board members focused on their mission statement. The members of our board all have experience in handling the different aspects of our purpose and goal, from project management through grant writing, all of the details that we need to have handled, PR, as well as fundraising. Now, blown away by the budget that Dave has to operate with. We operate on about $5,000 a year for our project implementation, which 95% of that goes into tree purchase. So, different scale of operation here, but these board members are really critical to the overall success of your entity. Having someone who knows project design, having a volunteer coordinator. Public relations is really important, and today that doesn't mean just a PR release to the newspaper. That means, do you have a web page? Do you have a Facebook page? Are you on Twitter? All of the electronic media that's out there now that's so easily adapted to what's going on currently. One of the key essences is the treasurer or accountant on your team, keeping that just flat and with no issues, especially for any grants. So those are the kinds of roles that are important to have on your team. And here we go. Two things that we did when we started that were really critical to our clean evolution was having legal assistance in preparing our documents for our 501c3, our nonprofit status, and our articles of incorporation. If you don't have a lawyer, we had the benefit of having about 3 lawyers on our initial board, so that was handled in-house. Perhaps someone you know out there you can tap that would be willing to do that as a service project for you. And then keeping track of the money so that the IRS is happy and your grant providers are also happy. And those are key to I think, your long-term success. So Okay, let's move on. Accounting and legalities. Okay, let's talk about that. Funding. Where do you get the money? Our board, unlike other boards, does not require fiduciary contributions from its board members. We have relied in the past on both state and federal grants. We've searched out private corporation grants and funding. IBM is one company here locally that's provided us funds. And then other corporations, even Costco has money set aside for community projects, and we've applied for it and received those kinds of grants. The other thing that's helpful is in-kind donations or services in schools and other supplies. Lowe's has given us shovels. And even local businesses will donate food and drinks for volunteers during their project day. One of the things that we wouldn't be as successful as we are today is critical, and that's collaboration with the City of Raleigh. Initially, we started out collaborating with the planning department, and now we work with the Parks and Recreation and Cultural Department of the City of Raleigh. They have provided labor, supervision, team leaders, as well as educational demonstrations. But the best thing about working with the city is that it's collaborative, they're a partner, and ongoing maintenance. We don't want to plant a tree to watch it die. That just, we don't need to make more mulch. The city follows up with watering programs, pruning programs, and if a tree needs staking, they will do that as well. When we leave a project site, we've planted the trees, we've spread mulch. By the way, we call ourselves privately mulch across Raleigh, not trees across Raleigh. And that is essential to having a successful experience, because our volunteers go back and look, where's my tree? My tree. Oh, there it is. They get really excited about having that commitment and participation. So we've also worked with other nonprofits, Rotary, Boys and Girls Clubs of Wake County. Many other entities have partnered with us, and including Taylor's Nursery here in Raleigh as a source for our trees. For a while, Trees Across Raleigh tried an experiment in growing trees. We wanted to see if we could grow more native species than were available in the commercial nurseries, better suited to the maintenance requirements of the city parks, as well as being pretty hardy trees with drought tolerance and all of those good indicators for good urban trees. We started out with ordering seedlings through the state program here in North Carolina and planted them up over the course of 3 years to have 10-gallon stock to plant out. What we discovered over about the 7 years that we ran the nursery program was that our volunteers really prefer to plant the trees rather than to weed and repot the seedlings up to the next container size. So we have since dispensed with the trees. They've been given away. Some have gone to Durham's tree planting program, as well as to general citizens who wanted to plant and take care of the tree. Lesson learned. So, planting day and planning for that. We start planning for our projects in pretty concentrated effort about 2 months before. We make sure that we're on the same page with the Parks Department, and we refine the design to make sure that we've got a good count of trees. And our formula is we need 2 volunteers for every tree to be planted. So 50 trees, 100 volunteers. We do divide them up into teams with a team leader, but typically we start at 9 and are done by 11:30. One of the things that we really try to emphasize is that our volunteers have a good time. If the media has come out, if we have a dignitary speaking, we hold everyone together. Otherwise, once they've signed in, signed the release, gotten their name tag, which is our code for, yes, I've signed a release, they move out and we start planting right away. We have divided planting project sites into different areas in the past, and we've also moved from one side all the way across to another side of the area. Both strategies have worked well for us. We provide gloves, we provide shovels, we provide snacks. We really want our volunteers to know that we appreciate them and that they have a good time. Okay. So where do they come from? Well, we've tapped into the public school system. We've tapped into community clubs such as Boys and Girls Clubs, Boy Scouts, other civic leagues, civic clubs, junior league, Rotary clubs for adults. All of them have an interest in coming out and helping plant trees. So we've even created an opportunity for a corporate entity to have a team building workday where we structure a project specifically for that corporation based on how many people they anticipate coming out. We'll tailor the site and the type of trees that we're planting to their specific objectives. In that process, we ask that the corporation provide us funds to cover the cost of trees and a small donation to our bank account to help us cover and fundraise. But that's pretty much where we found the best volunteer resources. When it comes to the project day, I've dubbed it as performance art. You set up, you get there early, you have everything ready for when the onslaught of volunteers come out and do sign-in registration, a little bit of snack, donuts, and OJ in the morning, and then divide everyone up and send them out with their shovels and gloves to plant trees. They do have a team leader with them who is responsible for quality control, and we have roving quality control throughout the project site. So we have, I have been known to say, that tree is really planted too low. Let's not leave it that way. Let's replant it. So we dig it up and do it over again. We want our volunteers to feel appreciated, so at the end of the effort we have snacks and hopefully send them home feeling like they've made a good contribution to the city of Raleigh in their efforts. People often ask, what's your rain date? We don't have one. Unless it's raining so hard that the pre-dug holes fill up with water, we plant. We have planted in rain. We have planted even in snow. Not the typical day. The only time we really also can't plant is if we're in a serious drought, and that has been a while. But when we were under drought conditions here in Raleigh, we sprayed mulch, and lots of mulch, which helps the trees maintain moisture and keeps the weeds down. That's pretty much our formula or pattern for how we run projects. When we first started, we would have 3 or 4 planting sites on one Saturday morning. Now we have usually 1 planting site. That's primarily because we have more fun. We have a good time working with the volunteers, and they seem to enjoy being all on one property as well, in a park or tree planting area. We try to now avoid the hot-button political projects. We'd like to be perceived as neutral and out of any of that political discussion, let's call it, that might mar a project's experience for our volunteers. We do pay very close attention to the weather, even though we have no ability to change it. We do try to pay attention, and especially if there's thunderstorms or serious hazard, tornadoes. We did have a tornado come through. But we also make sure that any location, whether we're planting in a public City of Raleigh park or on another nonprofit property, will have the follow-up maintenance and watering. And if it's not available, for instance, we planted at the SPCA of Wake County new facility and hired a watering truck to come in and water for 2 months after the trees were planted. That follow-up maintenance is so critical. So here we are at 20 years into this process, and what we found is that the need for trees across Raleigh has changed dramatically from when we started in 1996. You will likely experience that as well. What we have also determined is that our organizational needs have changed somewhat. So we have confirmed that our articles of incorporation allow us to work with other nonprofits, such as the Wake County Public Schools and the Boys and Girls Club of Wake County, to provide educational experiences for first graders in the public school system on, I think we've been on 5 campuses now. The first graders, the itty-bitties, make oak tree faces from leaves and acorns that they collect on their campus. In the classroom, we talk about the different parts of trees. So we do a demonstration about roots are pointing down at our toes, and then we form branches. It's very interactive, holding your arms up over your head. And then the kids, once they've, we've done that for a couple of sessions in classroom work, we go out and each class will plant a tree. Now, I'm sure you know the expression herding cats. Well, it applies. Little ones. But they have a good time. And, of course, we only have one shovel, so we're only keeping track of one shovel, and each child puts a shovel of dirt on. It's really an experience. It's well shepherded by the adults in place. We've worked at many of the sites. One site, particularly in southeast Raleigh, Washington Elementary, was very unfortunate in that they lost a great deal of their tree canopy when we had a tornado come through Raleigh several years ago. One of the beautiful old elm trees that was still in existence in Raleigh was felled by that. The image on the right is our efforts to replant and to expand their tree canopy. It's also a site for Boys and Girls Club students, and it's actually significant in that it was the first public high school for blacks in Raleigh. All right. So, I'm not going to read that. I think you can read that. This is Pullen Park in the city of Raleigh, where we've worked to replant and bring the canopy back up. Also, part of what we do is help the Parks Department's maintenance budget by taking the lawn out and putting it into mulch areas around trees. I think one of the things that we've strived for in our efforts over our existence is to have fun. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Cindy. So we've got just a couple minutes here for questions. If you guys want to go ahead and try and type in to the question and answer dialog box on the top left, you can present your questions, and I'll read them out and let both Dave and Cindy address them if you have any. While you guys are typing out a question, if you don't mind, I'm going to email this out as well, but just take a few minutes to fill out the evaluation. Let us know how today's webinar went. If there are some other topics you'd like to hear about in the future, it should only take you about 5 minutes to go through that survey, and just kind of let us know how we're doing and maybe how we can improve a little bit. Haven't seen any questions come by, so I'll send an email with that link to the SurveyMonkey evaluation shortly after this webinar. As I stated, The webinar is recorded. It'll take you about a week to get the webinar up online, but I'll send an email out with the link to the recorded session as well that you can then distribute to anybody that might be interested in that. And also, if we do have 2 other webinars coming up later this spring that you might also be interested in attending, one in March and one in April. And we hope to continue the Tree Board webinar series well into the future. So that's why we're always looking for additional topics and or presenters that you think might be able to talk about their programs and their efforts a little bit more. Did you want to say something about that, Cindy? Or
I'm not sure exactly how to post this, but Trees Across Raleigh has a brochure booklet that is too large to upload. If you would like to receive a copy, please email me at cynthiasrice@gmail.com.
Yeah, and you can always contact me if you want any follow-up questions or information from either Dave or Cindy. I've got their contact information. I can put you in touch with them. Yeah, so if you haven't registered for the March or April webinars, please take a few minutes, get our website, register. Next month's topic is the role of advocacy in urban forestry. We've got 2 really good presenters online for that. We've got Chuck Mills, who's out of California Relief, to talk about advocacy and what roles tree boards and community forestry members have in that, as well as Shannon Ramsey with Trees Forever. So we've got 2 really good people coming up in March. I haven't seen any questions come through, so with that, everybody is welcome to end the session and go about their regular business. So thank you, Dave. Thank you, Cindy. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your hectic schedules to do the presentation, and we hope to see everybody online next month. Have a great day.
Did you put them to sleep?
No, they're all, sometimes they don't have questions.
Okay.
I often get